My name is Mara Ellison. I am 67, a retired school librarian with wrists that still remember the heft of hardcovers and a voice that learned to fold itself into quiet so children could hear themselves become brave. I raised one son, Leo. For years I believed if I kept a light on and the kettle warm, nobody I loved would ever misplace their way back to me. The afternoon before his wedding, I stood at his dining table smoothing linen squares into little paper-white cranes. Camille, his fiancée, had sent me a clip that made it look effortless: thumb here, triangle there, press the wing. I'd practiced until the fabric learned my fingers. The house smelled like vanilla wax and new paint. Upstairs, a tailor was pinning Leo's cuffs. I could hear the soft murmur of approval each time the jacket lay right on his shoulders. Heels clicked behind me. I looked up. Camille stood in the doorway in a pearl ash rehearsal dress. Her hair loosened into careful waves, the kind of tidy beauty that seems arranged by invisible hands. She didn't step forward. She simply gazed at me with the patience of a clock. Her voice, when it came, was even. "Mara, the kindest gift you could give us this weekend is your absence." The next breath I took found a ridge in my throat. I folded one last crane and set it down. "I see," I said, though I barely did. She went on, still gentle, as if explaining a table diagram. "It should be love and celebration, not interruptions of mood. You've been tense." The word had a pleasant aftertaste in her mouth. Leo came down the stairs, jacket over his arm tie undone, like ribbon fallen from a box. He saw us and stopped. For a heartbeat, I thought he would laugh, shake his head, say, "Cam, you're being dramatic." He rubbed his neck instead, eyes darting between us. "Maybe it would be simpler, Mom. Just for the weekend." He didn't look unkind. He looked finished. On the sideboard was a stoneware mug with an indigo glaze, a hairline seam along its lip. My mug. Thomas, my late husband, had bought it for our 25th anniversary at a roadside kiln near Mendocino. He'd said it reminded him of me, ocean-colored sturdy edges softened by heat. I lifted it now. The tea inside had cooled. My hands did not shake as I carried it away. I didn't argue. I did not remind Leo that when the gym lights in second grade were too loud, he would curl under my cardigan until the drill ended. That when Thomas died, I cupped a hot mug between his palms and told him we were still a family if we remembered to take care of each other. Those truths belonged to another room. I walked past them both without sound, past a single chip saucer I'd washed by hand, because their dishwasher left spots past boxes of votive candles waiting for someone to strike a match. In the guest room, I had kept a small overnight bag, just in case, though I could never name the scenario. I placed a sweater inside the blue one with pebble buttons, a pair of flats, my reading glasses, and the mug wrapped in a dish towel. I closed the door behind me without testing whether anyone would follow. At the motel off Alder Street, the clerk slid a key across the counter with a sympathy he did not know he possessed. The room was trying too hard. Patterned curtains, a cheerful print of lemons, 2 tightly wrapped chocolates on a runner. It was clean. It was mine for the night. I set the mug on the windowsill and watched my reflection settle into the glass. I recognized my face, but not its expression, calm as if I'd rehearsed this. I brewed the motel's peppermint sachet in the coffee maker and held the heat against my fingers. The first sip tasted like someone else's breath. I sat at the little table and opened the notebook I bring everywhere out of habit. Habit at my age can be a rescue boat. I dated the page and wrote nothing. Memory arrived the way evening light climbs a wall. 3 years earlier, in a bank that smelled like lemon cleaner, I'd initialed a withdrawal slip that made my palm sweat $92,000 out of my retirement account. Leo had found a small house in Maple Ridge with a deep yard and a sunroom where he said I could read. Camille had nodded careful courtesy, her attention floating just past my shoulder. The plan: I would help with the down payment. They would take the mortgage, an in-law suite would be built at the back. "It'll be our home," Leo kept saying, his excitement cracking open every other sentence. Home was a word that used to open me too. Before I signed, I called Naomi Duarte, Thomas's old colleague, who never bothered with lace around a hard truth. "Mara," she told me on speaker while I watched the bank's ceiling fan make polite weather, "do not move a penny without your name somewhere on the deed or a recorded loan agreement. Even with your son. Especially with your son." I repeated her counsel to Leo later in his kitchen. He laughed in the way grown children laugh when they think love is an inexhaustible pantry. "Mom, paper, come on, we're not doing business, we're a family." Camille didn't laugh. I put Naomi's number in my wallet and did what a mother does when a child's happiness stands in front of her asking. I signed. The sunroom later became an art studio with a lock. The suite became a guest room whose blinds never learned to let in morning. Nobody said the word guest to my face. My mail never found the box at the end of their walk. Now, in the motel's stale light, I slipped my fingers into that wallet and found Naomi's card soft at the edges from being carried through seasons when I pretended I didn't need it. I dialed and let it ring once, then hung up. I brushed my thumb over the numbers and dialed again. She answered with sleep still in her throat. Duarte. It's Mara, I said. I'd like you to look up a title on Maple Ridge. The address is, I read it off Leo's, save the date, as if I were reciting a passage to a class that had gone unruly and needed a tone to follow. Naomi's voice woke itself. Give me 20 minutes. The call ended. I cupped my mug. The crack in the glaze caught light like a thin line of mercury. Through the thin wall, I could hear the television in the next room, arguing about weather over a stadium. My pulse steadied into the kind of waiting that once turned pages for children who hadn't yet learned to do it themselves. The phone lit the table. Your name. Naomi said not wasting a greeting was never removed from co-ownership on record. The quitclaim drafted in the file was never executed. You are still on the deed. The word deed sat in my chest with the weight of a book whose last chapter I had not expected to find. I closed my eyes just long enough to see the Maple Ridge sunrooms lock the blinds that swallowed morning. Thank you, I said. Mara, she added, if you want me to outline your options, I can, but you don't have to decide anything tonight. I know. I looked at the mug's seam again, thin as a healed cut. I just needed to know what was true. After we hung up, I stood by the window and watched the motel parking lot lights pull moths into their orbit. I thought of the cranes on the table, the care of my hands wasted on a thing that would never hold water. I thought of Thomas and Mendocino choosing that mug because he believed heat could temper clay and leave it stronger. I rinsed the cup at the sink and set it to dry on a threadbare washcloth. Then I dialed 3 numbers from a small folder in my bag, numbers I had acquired because I was the one vendors answered, the person whose checks cleared the voice that knew how to ask without sounding afraid. When the venue manager picked up, I gave my name and reservation code and asked her to place a temporary hold on further charges under my account pending review. My voice did not tremble. Paper answers to paper, I thought the way shelves answer to the books that belong on them. I put the phone face down, turned off the lamp, and lay on the bed fully dressed as if rest could be convinced to come by, not requesting too much of it. The room kept breathing around me, the soft tick of the wall unit traffic beyond the overpass, a late laugh traveling the hallway and thinning into quiet. Sleep met me like a page I had turned 1,000 times and never read. Dawn wore the color of copier paper when I woke in the motel and poured water over a second peppermint sachet. The room's radiator sighed as if it had spent the night standing guard. I rinsed my blue mug, dried it with a rough towel that left a faint lint halo on the glaze, and set it by my notebook. The quiet felt exact, like the careful space between letters on a ledger. I called Naomi at 8. She answered on the second ring the way people in her line of work learn to answer, present, not hurried. I'm ready, I said, for information, for action. Her inhale did not celebrate or scold. All right. Since you are still on title, you can petition for partition, force a sale, or compel a buyout of your interest. I'll draw papers. Do you want service expedited? Yes. My voice surprised me with its steadiness. Send me what I need to sign. And Naomi put a temporary notice to vendors that all contracts with my authorization are frozen. Already done for the venue. I'll extend to the caterer and music. I'll email you confirmations. Thank you. I'll send a courier by late afternoon with the petition. Read slowly. Sign when your hand is sure. After the call, I dialed numbers from the folder I kept under the mug. The florist, Kindling and Stem, recognized my name at once and asked if Camille was changing her palette from ivory to blush. I told her to pause the order and prepare a refund statement for the portion under my card. The quartet, a group of graduate students who had sent me polite emails about Haydn and humidity, agreed to release the date without fee. The bakery had already begun the burgundy sponge layers for a 5-tier tower. The owner's voice broke around the edges when he admitted it. He didn't ask me to reconsider. He asked where he could send my credit, and I gave him the motel's address because it was the address I had. By 9, my phone began to fill. The icon showed 10, then 12, then a red number like a rash. Leo had left a message, Mom, call me. Why are people saying there's an issue? Polite practice clipped from a life where problems are delegated to departments. Camille's first message used the voice one uses with a neighbor whose hedge needs trimming. Mara, there must be a confusion with the planner. Could you please undo whatever hold you placed? Another message arrived before I finished the first. The quartet just canceled. This is impractical. We need continuity. I didn't press play again. Somewhere between the florist and the bakery, the motel's housekeeping tapped the door with a rhythm that didn't try to be secret. I'm all set, I called. Thank you. I watched their cart wobble by through the peephole, a bucket, a stack of towels, a coffee maker that had wandered onto the shelf, a parade of small domestic rescues. I washed my mug in the sink because I had not learned another way to honor a dish that had served me. By noon, a courier in a charcoal suit and sneakers knocked. He handed me a thick envelope with my name typed precisely and a sticky flag that asked for my signature like a hand raised in class. I cleared the table set, the envelope beside the notebook, and opened it the way I used to open new books for the library, careful not to break the spine at once. The petition's language had the crisp chill of winter air headings, in small capitals, paragraphs numbered to make meaning behave. Naomi had tucked a bright blue pen into the folder. I read every page. When I reached the signature line, I waited. Not for doubt, but for the exact weight to come into my hand. Then I signed Marallison, each stroke steady as if I were writing my name for a child who needed to learn it by copying. The courier returned half an hour later to collect the papers. "Ms. Ellison," he asked softly as if he'd stepped into a sanctuary. I was told to wait. I handed him the folder. He thanked me with his eyes as if he knew that courtesy can sometimes pass as prayer, and left. The phone kept blooming. The planner called, then texted, "We're here to support any direction you choose." She wrote a sentence that bent itself into the proper shape of neutrality. Leo left another message, his voice too flat for fury. "Mom, the venue says they need your authorization to proceed. We need to talk." I turned the volume down until the phone vibrated against the table like a moth against a porch light. By mid-afternoon, the motel room felt too small for the air shifting inside it. I took my mug and walked to the strip of grass behind the building where trucks from the highway paused like animals dipping their heads to water. The wind had teeth, nothing serious, just enough to persuade the day to move along. I stood with my shoes on gravel and listened. When I returned, there was a knock that carried softness on the hinge. Not the housekeeping tap, not the courier's crisp rap. A polite, practiced knock that assumed doors open to it. I lifted the latch and found a woman I recognized from the engagement dinner photographs, Camille's mother. She had a face that lived on good lighting, gentle praise at corners, discipline along the jaw, and a string of small pearls at her throat. In one hand, she held a bottle of wine the color of cedar. "Ms. Ellison," she asked. "I'm Lorraine Mercer." She didn't wait for me to usher. She waited for me to decide. I stepped aside. She entered with the self-respect of a person who has learned to take up the space she pays for. She set the bottle on the table, but did not ask for glasses. "I didn't raise her to be unkind," she said without preface. Her voice had carriage. "But I also gave her many things instead of letting life say no." She kept her eyes on the bottle's label. "I hear you've withdrawn your support. And more. I've paused obligations that carry my name," I said. "Yes." She exhaled a small surrender, a correction. She dipped a hand into her bag and pulled out a long envelope. She held it like a person offering a handkerchief to someone else's grief. "This will cover your commitments through the weekend." 40,000. She said the number without flair, as if to avoid making it sound like a bribe, as if numbers could be unadorned and therefore innocent. Let them marry without a public mess. I looked at the envelope and then at her, at the way her pearls lifted slightly when she swallowed. "No," she blinked. Not offended. Silenced. "No, this isn't a bill." "Then what is it?" "Inventory." I let the word rest. Of what belongs to me and what does not. Lorraine sat slowly as if the air were a seat she had to trust before she put her weight on it. "She said something unforgivable to you," she murmured. "I'm not here to litigate that. I'm here because I know the particular loneliness of mothers who cover other people's debts, emotional and otherwise." She glanced at the envelope, then pushed it an inch toward me. "Take it for yourself then. No strings. Consider it gratitude for what you have given Leo, for the work unseen I imagine that got him to his tie and tux." I picked up the envelope and felt the stiffness of the check at its heart. Money is paper until it isn't. My thumbnail slid under the seam. I didn't open it. I tore it clean through the center, then halved it again. The sound was mild the way mercy sometimes is when it isn't theatrical. Lorraine did not gasp. The corners of her mouth trembled into something that wanted to be a smile but knew better. "You have a spine, Ms. Ellison." "I have a mug," I said, surprising us both. I lifted the cup. It's cracked. It still holds heat. Her gaze softened. "I understand." She stood. "People will say you were cruel. People like to narrate what they have not had to carry." She nodded once like a bow that had lost its ornaments. At the door she paused. "For what it's worth, I am ashamed of her sentence to you." I told her so. Shame clean and without perfume is rare enough to nod at. "Thank you," I said. Lorraine left her bottle on the table like an altar no one intended to use. The evening thinned. Naomi texted filed. "Process server en route to the Maple Ridge address before close of business. You may receive calls." The planner wrote another message, careful with tone. We have noted your cancellation of services under your account. The couple may rebook at their expense. We will treat all parties respectfully. The phone's vibration began to sound like weather there, not personal. I made tea in the coffee maker for the third time that day and drank it warm, even though peppermint should be hot to be itself. Outside the parking lot, lights came on with the loyalty of soldiers. I moved to the chair by the window where late light turns everything into a photograph. The messages shifted around 7. Camille's voice on voicemail lost its coaching glitter. Mara the planner quit because she says she won't be between family. Then a pucker of breath. The venue says there's a legal hold. A longer pause. Please call me. Leo's next message was a tight cord of anger and confusion. The locks don't respond to our codes. The notice on the door mentions your name. What are you doing? Another followed. Are you safe? The two sentences did not belong together, and yet they did the way a plea can be an accusation when two hands reach for one handle. I did not press play again. At 9, the knock returned. Not the courier's neat professionalism, not Lorraine's gentle diplomacy. A different rhythm, a thrift store drumline I'd heard since Leo had hands big enough to knock and small enough to need permission. I stood without hurrying. I placed my mug on the table. I opened the door. Leo filled the doorway like a lighthouse that had forgotten its job. Yesterday's shirt. Tie gone. The new suit's crease broken at the knee. His eyes had gone bright the way eyes do when they sleep in their salt. He didn't ask if he could come in. He stepped in because he was my son, and there are thresholds a mother tacitly signs, and then he stopped because he recognized the room was not a kitchen and not a childhood. Mara, he said. Not Mom. Then he swallowed and tried again. Mom. He stood with both hands open the way surrender auditioned in movies. Everything is falling apart, he said. The planner quit. The band won't play. The venue says they can't proceed without you. Camille is... He let the word break of its own accord. He looked around the room as if it might tell him what to say next. Please undo this. I didn't move. Rushing had been my sport for years. I had retired. Sit if you want, I said. He sat on the edge of the bed like a boy who had been told he could catch his breath but not sleep. You blindsided us, he said. No, I answered. I stopped underwriting you. He flinched at the neatness of the sentence. You could have talked to me. I have. For months. In small sentences you made into background noise? He rubbed his forehead with the heel of his hand the way he had done before AP exams, back when words and numbers seemed negotiable if he could just press hard enough on the correct spot. He looked at the table at the envelope stamped with the court seal lying beside my mug. Is that reality? I said. He reached for it as if it might burn him. He slid the first page out, skimmed, and stopped where the law requires names to stand upright. He stared at mine as if it were a foreign word he had heard all his life and only now saw on paper. He turned another page and his mouth tightened around breath. You're serious, he said, as if the law had written a joke and needed the tone confirmed. Yes, Camille will never recover from this. People recover from what they cause, I said, and the sentence felt neither cruel nor generous, only accurate. He looked around again at the room that had offered me shelter for a single day, and then at me, the person who had offered him shelter for more than 20 years. He didn't cry. Leo isn't a crier. He steeps. Tell me what you want, he said at last. The way a man asks a banker what number would make the problem behave. Accountability, I said, and distance until you can practice it. He opened his hands wider, palms up. I can make payments. We'll add your name. My name was never removed. He shut his eyes long enough for a lesson to pass through. Then he opened them and nodded once, a motion so small it would not have been visible from across a room. Okay, he said. Not agreement, acknowledgement. He stood, then sat again, not trusting his legs to show him the courtesy of accuracy. Are you safe? He asked. The question had shown up earlier on my voicemail like a stray dog. Here it was on a leash. I am, I said. The answer didn't need cadence or costume. He pressed his lips together until the blood stepped back out of them. He nodded toward the mug. Is that the same cup? Yes. It's cracked, he said. It holds, I said. Leo stood for real. He placed the papers back into the envelope with a reverence new to him. He did not reach for me. He did not ask me to reach. He walked to the door and rested his hand on the knob as if he had to ask permission of metal. He turned back. I'll call you tomorrow, he said the way people say it when tomorrow isn't a place to promise so much as a distance to cross. You can try, I said. He left. The hallway swallowed his steps and then gave them back softer. I closed the door. I lifted the mug and found the tea still warm enough. I stood by the window where the parking lot kept arranging its lights, and I let my breath find its measure in that small ceremony. The phone on the table vibrated once more and then went still. I didn't touch it. I washed the cup, pressed the seam with my thumb, dried it carefully, and set it by the notebook. Somewhere outside, a semi turned over its engine and rolled away a long iron sentence, moving from one clause to another. I sat, and I did not speak. The quiet did its work. By morning, the motel's blinds had learned how to sift light into neat gray ladders. I rinsed the blue mug and set it on the windowsill to dry. The room smelled faintly of peppermint and copy paper. When I opened the door for the newsprint, they still slid beneath rooms like mine. I saw an envelope with no return address and handwriting that had practiced being careful. Inside lay a photograph, a newborn, under a striped hospital blanket, eyes sealed as if guarding a small country. On the back, in a tilt that belonged to an unsteady hand, someone had written, "Her name is Mara. Thank you for everything we didn't deserve." The ink had paused twice, like breath working around a stone. I sat on the bed with the picture in my lap. I did not cry. I traced the baby's fist with my finger and felt the odd, steadying weight of my name landing where no argument could lift it. A name can be spoken as a door or as a promise that the door existed. I pressed the photograph against my notebook and let it rest there, a thin anchor of something that did not require my consent to be true. I called Naomi after 8. "I want the petition served today," I said, "and I want a meeting with Leo and Camille in a public place. No lawyers at that table, just civility." "Done," she said. "I'll confirm service and draft a notice inviting them to discuss next steps informally. You choose the place." "The Harbor Cafe on Alder," I said. "Corner booth if it's empty." At noon, I walked in early and asked for the corner. The cafe smelled like orange peel and warm milk. Tiles the color of unbleached flour caught the light. I sat with my back to the wall, my mug beside the water glass, because some habits refuse to stand. A barista set down a plate of cinnamon rolls that looked embarrassed by their own abundance. They arrived together. Leo first, hat in hand, exhaustion where bravado used to live. Camille 2 steps behind, hair in a low knot. No costume jewelry flats that understood sidewalks. She slid into the booth and folded her hands like a person about to recite an apology in a language she had only learned by ear. "I've been cruel," she said. "No overture, no garnish. I thought kindness meant weakness. I thought you were replaceable." She held my gaze a beat, then let it go and stared at the seam where floor met wall. "I'm sorry." The sentence sat between us like a cup too hot to lift. Leo cleared his throat. "We keep trying to fix this by asking you to pay for a version that hurt you," he said. His voice had lost its gloss. "I should have stopped it before it reached your door." I set my palm over the napkin and kept my voice even. "I'm not here to restore your wedding or your furniture deliveries. I'm here to speak about the house and about where I stand in relation to it." I tapped the table lightly. "The petition has been served. That remains." Camille nodded a small bow to the word served. "We know," she said. "A man in a dark suit handed it to Leo, and he read your name out loud like it had just been invented." She tried to smile. "She didn't. What do you want us to do?" "Bring a plan that does not rest on me," I said. "If you wish to buy my share, propose a timeline and proof of funds. If you cannot, then we sell. Those are the 2 honest roads." I gestured to the coffee. "Needing me looks like respect, not access to my account." Leo nodded slowly. "We'll build the numbers and send them to Naomi. I will read them," I said. "I will not rescue them." The barista drifted by with the cinnamon rolls, and none of us reached. Camille lifted her water with both hands. "May we bring the baby to meet you when she's cleared to leave the house?" she asked. The question was simple and enormous. "Ask again when a plan is in my hands," I said. We signed the check. I stood first. Not a performance, just the motion I had. "Thank you for meeting me," I said. We didn't hug. We didn't rehearse an understanding that hadn't learned its lines. We stepped out into the noon light and let the air be what it was. I called Naomi from the sidewalk. "Prepare a formal offer to settle by buyout," I said. "Fair market valuation, no discounts, 30-day window. If they meet it, we close cleanly. If not, we proceed." "Understood," she said. "I'll draft and messenger it this afternoon." She paused. "Mara, do you want to attach conditions beyond the number?" "No," I said. "Just the number and the date." The next days arranged themselves like ledger columns. Numbers arrived by email, first a sketch on a napkin pretending to be a budget, then a spreadsheet with cells the color of hope. The early drafts leaned on wish. The third tried austerity as theater. I forwarded each to Naomi with a single sentence, "Please review." My replies to Leo were brief and accurate. I slept at the motel with the ease of a person who had returned a book on time. In the evenings, I walked the strip of grass behind the building and listened to trucks speaking their long iron sentences down the highway. A new envelope appeared under my door with a photograph of the baby in a yellow cap. No note this time, just the mouth parted as if searching for a word. Lorraine returned once not with a bottle, but with a quiet that could have been applause if it had hands. She sat and told me about the time Camille threw a fit over a leather jacket in a department store while the mannequins stared with their painted patience. I wish I'd let her lose, she said. I kept giving her my wins. She didn't offer money. She offered a clean sentence and left it in the room until it became air. On the 10th day, Naomi called. They're trying, she said. But the numbers are short by an amount that feels like denial. Then the clock keeps time, I said. A week later, Leo sent a draft that finally stopped theatrics. He itemized what could be sold, what could be delayed, what belonged to them and not to me. He had even subtracted a line of spending that used to be disguised as courtesy. I forwarded it to Naomi. She answered 5 minutes later. If they produce the supporting documents, this clears. Do you want me to move them through a private lender we trust to keep the temperature down? Yes, I typed. Quietly. The courier returned with another folder, this one green. I initialed tabs each, a small flag planted on a hill I had once abandoned. The appraisals came in at a number that did not flatter or punish. Naomi's block script marched down a timeline with dates that belonged to no holiday. I signed where ink wanted to be permanent. Phone calls softened. Camille stopped performing warmth and spoke plainly. We've sold the second car. I took a part-time position at a dental office. We will meet the first transfer by Friday. She didn't ask me to bless it. Leo called with fewer words and more pauses. He didn't ask me to rescind. He asked for the routing number. I gave Naomi's escrow instead. On a Wednesday afternoon, the motel's air unit clicked and breathed, and then a message from the bank arrived like a bell. No music, just a tone that lands where it must. Naomi called immediately after. Funds cleared on the first tranche, she said. The remainder is scheduled within 5 business days. I'll confirm each receipt and release documents when the wire completes. Thank you, I said. I set the phone beside the mug and watched a truck pull into the lot, back up, correct and align itself with a space that had been waiting for it since morning. I did not shop. I did not tally what I might buy. I brewed tea and stood at the window and let the peppermint do its small work. The seam along the mug's lip caught a scrawl of light and gave it back without drama. A note slid under the door. Not from Leo or Camille. From the planner. Ms. Ellison. Thank you for your clarity. I've returned the retainers attached to your account. Wishing you steadiness. I folded the card and put it under the mug like a coaster. Naomi sent another update on Friday. Escrow received the balance. Recording and releases scheduled for Monday morning. You'll see the final confirmation by midday. I answered with a single word, received. The motel room didn't change shape. The blinds didn't brighten. The carpet still held the day's grit. But the air learned a new way to stand. Leo called in the evening without preamble. We wired the rest, he said. I sent the documents Naomi requested. She confirmed receipt. I know, I said. Silence then. Thank you for meeting me where the numbers lived. I let the quiet be long enough to be true. All right, I said. He hesitated. Camille found your mug in the cabinet when we were clearing shelves to list items. She left it on the counter like she knew it didn't need to be packed by us. It's with me, I said. Good. He exhaled a sound that belonged to no instrument I recognized. Good. After we hung up, I washed the cup, dried it with the same rough towel that shed its tiny halo on the glaze, and set it beside the photograph. The baby's cheeks were fuller in the second picture. Somewhere a woman I did not recognize had said my name into a room, and a nurse had written it on a band. Paper had done what paper does. So had people finally. Naomi's final call came 2 days later. All recorded, she said. Wires complete. You'll receive a packet by courier, your copies, the receipts, the release. All right, I said. I could hear traffic through her office window, a steady hush. Thank you for speaking the language I needed. It's just paper, she said, but paper when it's accurate can be a dignified thing. After the call, I placed the green folder on the table and smoothed my hand over it, the way I used to smooth new jackets on library books, so their corners would last past careless hands. The motel's lamp drew a circle of light around the mug and the photograph and the folder, 3 objects that had learned to share a table. I made another cup of tea and let it cool to the exact temperature that doesn't ask for attention. Then I lifted the mug and drank until the seam on its lip found mine and held. On Monday, the courier returned with a neat parcel of copies, receipts, releases, the final recording rubber-banded like a small finished archive. I laid the packet beside the blue mug and the 2 photographs and watched the lamp draw a circle around them. 3 objects, 3 weights, nothing theatrical. I made tea and drank it to the line where the seam on the lip met mine and steadied there. I moved the next afternoon. The apartment I chose sat on the 2nd floor of a square, quiet building with railings painted the color of salt. From the balcony, I could see a sliver of water beyond warehouse roofs enough to convince a day to move forward. The keys were on a ring with a plastic tag the manager had written by hand, Ellison 2B. I slid the bolt once, twice feeling the clean click each time. I unpacked without ceremony a stack of worn paperbacks, 2 sweaters, a kettle, a lemon tree, and a clay pot that an elderly clerk at the nursery assured me would mind its manners if I minded mine. The blue mug took its place on the sill as if it had been resting there between pages. In the kitchen drawer, I kept the green folder from Naomi. It made no sound in the night. Numbers rarely do once they've taken their final shape. After 3 days of walking the neighborhood, I found a community center with bulletin boards, layered like bark lost dogs tai chi. Writing group adult literacy volunteers needed. I signed the form at the desk. On Thursday evening, I sat at a round table with 2 girls who didn't trade their names until we had traded pages. One wore a sweatshirt that had learned rain. The other drew tiny anchors in the margin whenever a sentence landed in the harbor of sense. We read slowly. We circled subjects and verbs as if they were birds on a wire. When the hour ended, the quiet one tore a corner from her notebook and slid it to me without looking up. Thanks for waiting when I froze. I tucked the scrap under my mug when I got home. The paper curled as it dried. It still said what it needed to. The apartment learned me. A neighbor left a pot of basil on my mat with a note signed only with a sketch of a cat. The laundromat's owner began to set aside a roll of quarters. The librarian at the branch on 4th Street started to hold a new mystery at the desk. When she saw me coming, the dust jacket uncreased as if it had waited its whole life for careful hands. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday, slipped under the door like a shy thought. Cream card, stock serif type, a wash of yellow balloons printed across the top. No return address. My name in Camille's hand this time without the guardrails of flourish. Amara Rose, 1 year. We'd like you to come. No expectations. Just presence. The line sat with its back straight. Nothing else. I set the card on the refrigerator with a magnet shaped like a seashell in boiled water. I stood at the sink and let the kettle speak in the old way. Then I took the mug to the balcony and watched the lemon tree hold its leaves to a light wind. I didn't answer the card that day. I didn't mark a date on a calendar. I watered the tree until the soil darkened and then lightened again, and the evening took its time crossing the roofs. On the morning of this party, I chose the blue cardigan with pebble buttons, not because of photographs, but because the knit knew my shoulders. I placed the mug in the sink, face down on a towel. It seemed safe from accident. I took only a small envelope, blank card inside, and the keyring with Ellison 2B catching light briefly when I locked the door. The house on Maple Ridge had new paint on the porch, but the same hairline crack on the second step where winter had tested it. The lawn was dotted with paper suns on sticks, a cheerful parade that learned nothing from weather. I paused at the bottom step long enough to put breath in order and then climbed. The door opened before I lifted my hand. Camille stood there with her hair tied back and a soft, ordinary sweater that didn't demand attention. She said my name once, not as a question. I answered with hello. We moved into the room the way people step into a chapel after the service, while the scent of wax still hangs and the pews wait without judgment. Inside, the noise had shaped children laughing toward the window, adults holding paper cups and the ends of sentences, a song from someone's phone trying to be a soundtrack. A banner read "One" and considered its work done. Leo came from the hallway holding a child in a yellow dress with a ribbon like a small sun over her ear. She looked at me with the serious curiosity children reserve for faces that feel like doors. He said Mara and then corrected himself, Mom, and then didn't say anything else. I took a step closer. The child reached a hand as if trying to learn the distance between skin and air. Hello, I said softly, the way I used to begin read-alouds with shy first graders. She blinked and made a small sound that wasn't a word and didn't need to be. Camille moved to the sideboard. When she turned back, she carried a mug I recognized from their kitchen cabinet, a sturdy white with a thin cobalt rim, a chip near the handle small as a thumbnail. She set it on the coffee table in front of me without narration. The steam rose with a patience I understood. I lifted the cup. The warmth took my hands first, then my mouth. No one asked whether the tea was right. No one took a photograph. I stayed long enough for a slice of cake, cut too cleanly for a child's fist, to leave a print of frosting on my sleeve, for Lorraine to squeeze my shoulder once, with the grip of a woman who had already said the proper words and was learning to let silence do work she couldn't. I stood near the bookshelf I used to dust when the dishwasher ran too loud. I did not inventory what was there or missing. Near the door, a row of little shoes had been taken off and placed in pairs that did not belong to me to straighten. Before I left, I set the small card from my envelope on the hallway table where keys land when they've forgotten they are metal. On it, I had written in my library script, steady and square, "Teach her to thank you out loud. Teach her not to erase the person who taught her." No signature. I didn't need one. Outside, the light had rounded the corner of the porch and climbed halfway down the steps. A breeze nudged the paper suns and made them nod like elders in a pew. I walked to my car without hurry. At the corner, I could still hear children, but the sound already knew how to carry without me. Back at the apartment, the lemon tree held a new pale bud at the end of one branch, as if the day had been busy in my absence. I filled the watering can and tipped it slowly until the pot bragged a little dark circle. On the table, I stacked the photographs. The green folder, the community center flyer with Thursday circled in pencil, and the note torn from a student's notebook that still kept its gentle plea. I put the kettle on. When it clicked, I poured water over peppermint and waited until the steam drifted low and quiet. I drank from the blue mug until the seam reached my lip and found its place. The room, the pot of soil, the half-full dish rack, the soft thrum of pipes inside walls, each held steady as if instructed. The balcony took the late light and spread it thin over the railing. In the alley, a cat, maybe the one from the neighbor's sketch, stepped like punctuation along the fence and disappeared under the lilac. I brought the mug outside and leaned my forearms on the rail. A couple on the sidewalk below passed with a stroller and the practiced choreography of two people who had made peace with small wheels and uneven curbs. Far off, a horn sounded from the water and then drifted into nothing I needed to call by name. When the cup was empty, I rinsed it and set it upside down on the towel. I stood in the quiet kitchen with my hands on the counter and watched a single drop gather at the lowest point of the clay and fall. The sound it made against the cloth was small, exact, and complete. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. I'll see you next time as we continue exploring more journeys and lessons together.